Hello everybody, welcome back to Momo vs. MTG. Today I have a top 5 casual Commander etiquettes that you and maybe others in your play group might want to incorporate. This list here is mainly the highlights of stuff I've seen in my own play groups that I've seen that are good or bad, and maybe even talking with other people, have they seen in their own play groups that these are some things that they like to see or some things that they don't like to see. So I put together a little comprehensive list of maybe some stuff you want to incorporate into your Commander gameplay with you and others in your group, and kind of play Commander with a little more class, right? And I'll dive a little bit deeper into that later on. But first off, let's start with uh, taking shortcuts, right? And in particular, fetch lands, but this applies to ramp or some kind of deal that requires you to search your library. Maybe you want to, if you search your library, say, hey, I'll shuffle it after my turn or something, because it can take a little while for something like that. But again, little intricacies here and there, but the time does add up. So for instance, someone plays a turn 1 Arid Mesa, they take 3 to 5 business days to go get their tapped land, which they know they're not going to use with any mana, and then they say go. In reverse, you could have been, play a fetch land saying, hey, I'm grabbing a tapped land, go ahead, not doing much with it, and then shuffle up and search on someone else's turn. As per se, another scenario is someone can play that fetch land, overnight it to grab their land that they're going to use for mana, tap that first soul ring, maybe a talisman, and even play a spell. Maybe announcing this beforehand, especially in casual play, you don't see, as much of a problem with this. But saying, hey, I'm going to grab this land, tap it for mana, use it for a talisman, play a spell. Even on like turn 1, helps you speed up that process even while you're still searching, maybe for a card. On someone else's turn, you could say go while someone else takes their turn. Not always the case, especially if people have interaction. It's not always good to shortcut like this. However, that's my second point is don't do shortcuts when, it seems not necessary or like it won't, benefit anyone. In particular, something funny, I've seen, I do, what other players I've seen do is announcing their phases just overall, especially that untap, upkeep, draw, right? You hear that a lot, but it could go a long way where, upkeep, there's a lot of triggers, helps me to remember my own triggers first off, but, second off, if someone else has an upkeep trigger even during your turn, or, they have interaction during your upkeep, it's a nice way to, assure that everyone has an opportunity to cast their spells if they want to without skipping over any phases in that sense. Because I've seen all too often where someone might go to the draw step, skip straight to combat. It's like during their first main, you're passing priority to someone else. If someone has the spell they want to do, by all means they can. And where I see this most prevalent is, the combat phase where, someone might just skip their main phase, but you say, hey, before you go into combat, I have a response to something. Maybe they have a, enters combat trigger in one of their permanents, right? That you want to stop, so you want to either remove it or something like that. It just allows opportunity for everybody to, have their say in the Commander game, right? And the second biggest area I really see this is in declare attackers phase, right? Um, you know, some people just shortcut around and saying, hey, only these creatures are going at you, the rest of these creatures are going elsewhere. And I've seen people try to, interact with all the attackers, if they just assign attackers to one person but haven't finished declaring all their attackers. I've seen scenarios where people are already ready to fire removal, that kind of deal, without all the game information being, declared that has to be. Because then sometimes it changes people's minds. Like, oh, you're going to remove this creature, I'm going to send more at you, right? It just changes the dynamic a little bit sometimes. And, having the opportunity to, work through all these phases entirely as they should be helps the game flow a little bit nicer. And, taking a second to slow down a little bit, say, hey, entering combat, moving to declare attackers goes a long way, right? And then saying, I finished declaring attackers. And, then give people a chance to respond, especially with all the triggers, that kind of deal. So, take shortcuts when it seems good, but don't shortcut everything because then you get into some sloppy play a little bit. But Commander players, we love to take shortcuts to begin with, so with your own digression, right? So moving on from there.
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
So number three is respecting your time and others at the table, right? So we all been in this infamous situation where we're here. I pass a turn, and you're the next player. Maybe you were, thinking into the distance, right? Not really having a full coherent game plan of what's going on, and you say, "Oh, okay, I guess it's my turn," with like no plan in mind, right? We've all been there, but what really helps with this to stay a little focused in on the game is trying to plan ahead and not to doodle around, right? And this comes in a combination of assessing the board state as turns happen, um, from turn to turn, following what people are doing, and then also like having a general game plan of what you want to be doing on your turn, because most of the time you can usually figure out what your next play is going to be. Of course, if something drastic happens, like someone presents a win con, something immediately, right, that can change the dynamic entirely. But for the most part, I could probably plan a turn or two ahead of the general sense of what I'm doing. So when someone does pass their turn to me, I'm not, shock and awed, like saying, "Oh, what am I supposed to do now?" So, kind of staying tuned in a little bit helps. And what distraction from this is most prevalent I've seen is the phone usage, and hear from others too, right? That it's a little bit rude if you're just constantly on your phone when someone else is taking their turn, announcing their game actions, and that kind of deal. It's a different story if someone's dirting around for you know 10, 20 minutes turns when they're not really doing too much. That's a different discussion, and that still is a part of this of respecting your time and others. So if we can limit the phone usage and or whatever distraction you may have, right? Um, and also your own turn, so that the games flow a little bit nicer, really could go a long way. And not to say, of course, you got important significant other, you got family members reaching out. It's like, of course, like everyone has life. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say, you know, don't be constantly scrolling on whatever social media platform you're, or whatever have you're doing on it. Mid game just shows a little bit less respect to the other's player's time, and that kind of deal. And the last point here is what I've seen is just a little bit niche is like constantly asking the same questions. It'd be turn one or two. Like sometimes it's funny, but then it's like the guy's asking the same question over again, right? Like, what's everyone's graveyard state? And for the past 3 or 4 turns, no one's really been casting non-permanent spells. Maybe one ramp spell went into the bin in between turns, and he's asking everybody, hey, what's your graveyard size? What's how many cards do you have in hand? It's like all this information that's pretty known. And again, clarifying questions on board state and everything else is perfectly fine, but the constant what's everyone's graveyard size like? That kind of deal is kind of like interesting, interesting to see. So asking questions good, constantly bombarded with the same not as important information is something to try to stay away from. Not too big of a deal, but little things here and there. And of course, with the phone limit thing is, yeah, I don't use my phone too much, so I usually offer it up as the life tracker. So that's that. Number 4, instant speed scooping. People go hit or miss, especially in both direction on this. Some people are avid, instant speed scoopers, but me and many others do see the problem with this is someone is mid combat on their turn or moving into combat, they know that they're going to lose no matter what. So, let's say the opponent has 2 Colossus Dreadmaws. He's thinking, oh, I'm going to swing one at to take the other player out and one at you. But this player down here, opponent 1, decides that, hey, I'm going to instant speed scoop, right? So now all of a sudden the board state changes. This player is no longer here, and both of them are going to be swinging at you. So a lot of house rules that I've seen have sorcery speed scooping, where you can scoop on your turn, but scooping on other people's turn really affects the game with consequences. Some or most of the time, right? I've known people who are avid, instant speed scoopers, um, and they don't really see, too much of a problem with that. And the one person, which I don't play with anymore, was kind of, a little bit malicious in the sense of, his thought process is if I instant speed scoop, that means the game's going to progress faster, and then I'm going to be able to play my deck again faster, right? It's just the kind of intentions he had there was not, the nicest. So, lo and behold, that was a whole package to unfold, but we don't play with that guy anymore. Not because of that, but it was because of there was many leading up things to cause the scenario. So that's just a little niche thing here. Instant speed scooping. Try to stay away from it. Sorcerer speed, cool. Yeah. Moving on. And the last little tip here. Everybody makes mistakes, right? And I'll leave you with this: is English is hard. English is my first language, and it's very hard. And second, Magic Gather is even harder, right? So if you look here, the Magic Comprehensive Rules PDF is almost 300 pages, right? Just on the, digital version you can acquire. So people do make mistakes, right? And often not, usually they're me too. Like there's missed things that I'll miss. Some triggers, some missed things I'll live with. But, some little things here and there is, maybe I want to play this land instead of that land. Be like, yeah, go for it. This is casual. Try to have a fun time. Every little thing that they miss, these add up and get kind of annoying. But especially if they, were to produce different game scenarios, different story here. But for instance, someone plays, maybe their land before their Avengers Zendikar, right? Like, very silly one, easy one to miss. So, hey, still would have had the mana to cast my Avengers Zendikar and then play a land on top of it, right? So instead of getting no landfall trigger, they would get a landfall trigger. Everybody has different rules, different house rules of how this works, but for the most part, if I'm playing on a casual pod, yeah, go for it, right? Like, you want to do the other order, you understand, unless it affects some things in a different way that, maybe would change your mind. So, that's that with that rule. Yeah, just some final thoughts there is, generally speaking, we come together, play, have a good time, and whatever nights we deem, and that's why we love Commander. So just take it with a grain of salt, and, everybody is there to respect each other's time and, really have a fun time. So that's my final thoughts on it. So thanks for hanging out with Momo versus MTG. These are some etiquettes and maybe you want to incorporate. So until next time, I'll see you later.